By the time the guns fell silent in 1918, for great empires that had ruled the world for centuries were gone. Their crowns shattered, their armies broken, their flags lowered forever. The Great War did not just change borders, it erased entire worlds. The Romanovs, the Habsburgs, the Hohenzollerns, the Ottomans, names that once commanded millions, now became ghosts in history's shadow. This is the story of the empires that vanished. In the summer of 1914, Europe was a continent of empires. From the Atlantic to the Black Sea, crowned heads ruled vast, diverse realms, dynasties older than nations themselves. To many, it seemed eternal. The Austrian emperor still wore the same crown that had graced his ancestors for generations. The Tsar of Russia claimed to rule by divine right. The Kaiser in Berlin dreamed of global power. And in the fading East, the Ottoman sultans still held the last breath of an ancient caliphate. But within 4 years, all of them would fall, not to one another, but to the fire they themselves unleashed. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was more than an act of terror. It was the spark that exposed a century of decay. Empires that had survived revolutions, wars, and crises were now built on sand. Beneath their glittering palaces and armies lay ethnic tensions, outdated monarchies, and populations yearning for self-rule. When the great mobilizations began, each empire believed it would emerge victorious. The Austro-Hungarian Empire expected a quick victory over Serbia. The German Empire imagined triumph and expansion. The Russian Empire believed divine destiny was on its side. The Ottoman Empire saw a chance to reclaim lost glory. Instead, the war became a machine grinding down everything that fed it. In 1914, Germany was Europe's rising power, industrial, educated, and confident. Kaiser Wilhelm II stood at its head, restless and theatrical, believing himself destined to lead a new world order. His empire, forged only decades earlier in 1871, had become a symbol of modernity, steel, science, and discipline. But the Kaiser's ambitions would destroy it. Germany's war machine swept through Belgium and into France. The early victories fed the illusion of invincibility. But when the war bogged down into trenches, Germany's might turned inward. Its economy starved, its people strained, and its unity cracking. The British blockade strangled German trade, and by 1916, bread was rationed. On the home front, mothers buried children who died not by shellfire, but by hunger. The army still fought brilliantly, from Verdun to the Eastern Front, but morale was fading. By 1918, revolution had come home. Sailors mutinied in Kiel, workers filled the streets, and red flags rose over Berlin. Wilhelm fled to exile in the Netherlands, and the empire he had ruled with arrogance dissolved overnight. In its place came the Weimar Republic, fragile, wounded, humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles. But the ghost of the Kaiserreich would not rest. Its scars and resentments would one day give birth to something far darker. The German Empire, proud, disciplined, and ambitious, vanished not in defeat on the battlefield, but in the collapse of belief. If Germany was the hammer of modernity, Austria-Hungary was a relic of the old world. It was an empire held together not by unity, but by compromise. Austrians, Hungarians, Czechs, Croats, Poles, and more than a dozen other peoples, all bound beneath the aging rule of Emperor Franz Joseph. In 1914, he was 84 years old, a man who had already outlived his heir, his wife, and his own century. His empire was a museum of monarchies, and yet, when war came, its armies marched with pride. But the cracks were everywhere. Ethnic divisions tore through the ranks. Hungarian officers distrusted Czech conscripts. Slavs resented their Austrian commanders. The empire's industries could not keep pace with the demands of modern warfare. As the war dragged on, famine and disease consumed the home front. The army became a ghost of itself, underfed, undersupplied, and demoralized. By 1918, Austria-Hungary was not an empire at all, but a collection of dying nations pretending to still be one. When the armistice came, it simply disintegrated. Czechoslovakia declared independence. Hungary separated. Yugoslavia was born. The ancient Habsburg crown was placed in a museum, and Emperor Karl I, the last ruler of a 600-year-old dynasty, was forced into exile. The Austro-Hungarian Empire did not fall. It evaporated. His people woke up one morning not as subjects, but as strangers in new countries. No empire suffered more than Russia. When war began, Tsar Nicholas II led a nation of 180 million people, stretching across 11 time zones. His soldiers marched beneath icons and banners, believing in God, the Tsar, and the motherland. But their faith met the brutal machinery of modern war. The defeats at Tannenberg and Masurian Lakes shattered the myth of Russian strength. The army bled without end. Millions dead, millions more captured. Behind the front, hunger and revolution brewed. In 1917, the empire imploded. The Tsar abdicated, the Romanovs were imprisoned, and the Bolsheviks seized power. Within months, Russia signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, surrendering vast territories to Germany. The empire that had once been Europe's largest was now ashes. The Romanov dynasty, rulers for more than 300 years, ended in a basement in Ekaterinburg, where the royal family was executed by firing squad. But even as the old empire vanished, a new one was being born. Out of the ruins of the Tsar's world rose the Soviet Union, a different kind of empire, forged not in crowns, but in ideology and steel. The Russian Empire did not die quietly. It transformed, bleeding into the century that followed. For centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been the bridge between East and West. Its sultans ruled from Constantinople, heirs to the caliphs, masters of Anatolia, Arabia, and the Balkans. But by 1914, it was called the sick man of Europe. Its borders were shrinking, its economy fragile, and its people restless. When the Great War began, the Ottomans gambled their survival on alliance with Germany. The decision was both desperate and fateful. The war on the Middle Eastern Front was brutal. The Ottomans fought fiercely at Gallipoli, where they repelled the Allied invasion under the command of a rising officer named Mustafa Kemal. It was one of the empire's few triumphs, and one of its last. Elsewhere, the empire's strength dissolved. Arab revolts, fueled by British gold and promises of independence, tore through the deserts. The Armenian genocide stained its legacy with unimaginable horror. By 1918, British and Arab forces had captured Damascus and Baghdad. The empire's heartland was exposed. When the armistice was signed, the once mighty Ottoman Empire was finished. The Sultan was dethroned. Its lands were divided among Britain and France. But from its ruins rose the Republic of Turkey, born of war, forged in the same city where the empire had ruled for 600 years. The Ottomans did not just lose their empire, they lost their world. By 1919, Europe was unrecognizable. For crowns, the Hohenzollerns, the Habsburgs, the Romanovs, and the Ottomans had all fallen. The old order, the divine right of kings, the harmony of dynasties, the idea that empires could last forever, had been destroyed. The war had not just redrawn borders. It had rewritten human history. In its place came republics, revolutions, and ideologies. The age of empires gave way to the age of nations. But the price was unthinkable: millions dead, continents in ruins, and a generation that would never recover. The peace that followed was fragile, built on revenge and exhaustion. Germany was humiliated, Austria dismantled, Russia isolated, and the Middle East carved apart by foreign hands. The seeds of the next catastrophe had already been sown. Empires had vanished, but their ghosts lingered. Even now, the legacy of those vanished empires shapes our world. The collapse of Austria-Hungary left a mosaic of fragile states that would later be torn apart by nationalism. The fall of the Russian Empire birthed a new superpower and a new ideological struggle. The end of the Ottoman Empire redrew the Middle East in ways that still burn today. And Germany's humiliation laid the groundwork for another, even deadlier war. Empires may die, but their borders, their wounds, and their ambitions live on. A century later, the faces of the fallen emperors stare from faded photographs. Nicholas, Wilhelm, Franz Joseph, Mehmed. Their crowns are gone, their palaces are museums, but their decisions still echo through time. The Great War was not the end of an age. It was the funeral of one world and the birth of another. The world we live in today is built on the ruins of theirs. The empires that vanished are gone, but their shadows stretch across the century like the long dusk of history. They remind us that even the greatest powers can crumble, and that no empire, no matter how vast, how rich, or how divine, is eternal.